Day. My name's Karen. I lead our sales team and go-to-market team over here at Codif. We are an AI-powered low-code automation platform for customer-obsessed companies. So we really support brands really end-to-end with the optimization of the life cycle of their customer interactions. And we get to work with amazing teams day in and day out. And amazing CX leaders, which is why we're here today. And we really like to spotlight as many of those leaders as possible and their insights, especially around AI and automation, which has really taken our industry by storm. So yeah, I'm gonna be driving things today and supporting with this conversation. And then I'm joined by my colleague Kelsey. So Kelsey, you want to give a quick intro?
Everyone, as Karen mentioned, my name's Kelsey. I've been with Codif for a few months now, but have been working in the CX and support world for almost 5+ years now, and I've had the pleasure of getting to work with great leaders, and one of them being Kristen. So I'm very happy she got to join us today. We spent a long time building a really great relationship with past work we've done together, which has led us to where we are. So Kristen, I don't know if you would like to give a quick kind of background for yourself, and then we can dive into things.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the introduction. I'm Kristen, and I am a customer experience consultant and leadership coach with the CX Coach. Prior to that, I was the customer experience director at Maiden Cookware. And prior to that, where I have met Kelsey, I was the customer experience director for Shokz for about 5.5 years.
Oh, tell us more about the CX Coach. What kinds of organizations do you work with?
Yeah, so I primarily work with small to medium D2C businesses. A lot of startups, small e-commerce businesses, people who are kind of new to that space, because that's essentially where my background is starting from, I was the 8th employee at Shokz and growing into, 30+ customer service agents. So people who are going on that same journey.
That's awesome. Well, can you tell us maybe Shokz, maybe a little bit more about that journey specifically with Shokz?
Yeah, so Shokz, I was the 8th employee at Shokz, and when I started, I was the one and only customer service representative there. And, we grew very quickly. Obviously, we went up to 30 customer service agents, within a couple of years. And some of that growth was very, very quick. So for example, we went on Good Morning America's Deals and Steals. And overnight, the brand awareness that we generated from that and the orders that we had received from that campaign, I had to hire a team of 4 within a week. So when you're a company that size, sometimes your success comes that quickly. And that's where, you start to turn into some of these technology solutions to help you scale. So you're not just continuously adding customer service agents, year after year as your sales increase.
Sure. Speaking of just like fast-paced changes that you all saw at Shokz, and obviously the technology pieces you had to adapt along with how your team grew quickly, I was kind of curious with how fast we're seeing AI take over the CX world today. Like, what are some of the biggest changes you've seen when it comes to the technology landscape for teams like Shokz, for Maiden, and the others you're working with today?
Yeah, absolutely. It's changed quite a bit, actually. So, back in 2018, 2017, when I had first started my, customer experience career, I would attend these events like Next Generation Customer Experience, Customer Service Summit. And predominantly the conversation at that time was about omni-channel. It was about, team culture. There wasn't a lot of AI. There was maybe 1 or 2 sessions about it. And, they weren't really well attended. And over the years, that really increased, I think, partially because of COVID. As these businesses started having to reduce their manpower, they started looking at other solutions. And in that time, the technology had also started to improve. And then, of course, within the last 2 years, the launch of GPT technology has really just changed the landscape of that and has turned AI into something that, only had a handful of really passionate people about, not a lot of believers, into something that I see a lot of executives really excited about implementing.
Yeah, for sure. I think too, in some of the conversations we have with leaders today, especially with how much AI, like when we think about what does AI even stand for, what does it mean? There's different iterations of what people's understanding is of it. But then there's some nervousness, there's excitement. What are you seeing today when you're working with executives and other directors when it comes to like AI solutions?
Yeah, there's a lot of mixed emotions. You might see from your CEO, for example, excitement about the potential of the productivity and efficiency. But then you might see from your head of marketing concern about what does this mean from a brand perspective? How is this going to look to our consumers? You might have your head of technology concerned about the implementation of the technology, how many of our resources are going to be needed in order to get this up and running. And then you might have a CFO who's looking at the cost of the product, wondering, are we going to get a good RTI on this? Are we going to be locked into a contract that doesn't work for us? And in addition to that, there can also just be some uncertainty about AI in general. AI is a wide umbrella term that can mean anything from machine learning to the GPT experience. So having a shared understanding of the AI that everybody is talking about is important as well.
Sure. I'm kind of curious too, I feel like in a lot of conferences and conversations I've seen lately, a lot of people are worried about, all right, it's one thing to sell it to an executive or a leader, but like, how are you pitching it to your frontline agents and the other teams? Like, obviously there's some impact there, but like, how are you bringing that forth to your team today?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So in my experience, I have found that at least with customer experience employees, there's a little bit of excitement for it because there's a lot of projects in customer experience that sometimes go undone because there's a ticket to solve. There's so many things that we need to react to in customer service because to a certain extent, that's the nature of the role. Nobody plans for things to go wrong. When there's time now to be able to focus on things like really improving your knowledge base or being proactive with some of your customer communications, doing some of these surprise and delight things, there's time for all that. And there's time for those CX agents to kind of, deepen their skills a little bit more, deepen their interest a little bit more, and do some work that's impactful and meaningful in a different way than the one-on-one interactions with the customer. With the customers. In addition to that, sometimes there may be concerns. Is this going to replace my job? So you want to definitely listen to those concerns, bring people into your vision of what you plan to do with this technology. And possibly, most important is bring them literally into some of that decision-making process, especially if it's something that's going to impact their day-to-day. I can share from experience, as well as I know my team, as well as I know their workflows, I find that when I bring them into the decision-making process on technology, they're able to bring in to that conversation details about their day-to-day that I don't necessarily know without having done that work myself regularly the way that they are. So they can bring a level of insight that's important in part of your selection process.
100%, yeah. I love the involvement of the frontline agents because, like you said, like they're in the day-to-day, they're in the weeds. So sometimes the things that are problems for them, the executives don't really always know about. But I'm kind of curious too, like speaking of getting involved in like decision-making processes, what would your recommendations be like as, from original CX tools and implementations there, what are some highlights you would call out for like when evaluating the different AI solutions? I know we kind of touched on like AI is such a wide umbrella. Different things for different teams. So what are some basic highlights you've been looking out for today?
And I would be Kristen, around like goal setting too. Like, obviously engaging with multiple teams across the organization, but aligning on like, what are we actually hoping to achieve here, right? So like, where does that kind of come into the process? And like, how when you're engaging with executives as a consultant, right, do you recommend that they map out that process?
Yeah, that's a really great question because a lot of times businesses will just say, we want to leverage AI. And okay, where? There's a lot of different implications for it. Where I find in customer experience specifically, where it is most attractive is either on the deflection side, having it be customer facing, and kind of come in as a very experienced bot, but better, and then as a co-pilot for your agents in order to increase productivity. And gratefully, we are in a time where, you know, there's platforms that will offer both. So in customer experience, that's where I see a lot of that. As far as what's going to be the best solution for your business, I think there's two things that need to be considered because AI is that wide umbrella. One is what's going to make the most impact for your specific business. Where are you seeing the opportunity? Because not every business is going to have the same amount of opportunity. So for example, if you're a business that has a lot of transactional questions, that's great. And that's pretty easy to be able to create some automations and some AI and to be able to leverage those opportunities to be able to have that efficiency. But, you know, there's going to be other businesses that have a little bit more complex of a troubleshooting process where it might be able to get you part of the way, but not the full way. So being able to go through your inquiries, going through those tags, seeing where is there opportunity for AI to be able to come in and help us with this. And you can look at channels too. Where is your volume? Is it on chat? Is it on email? Is it a combination? And where does this fit for our business?
And I think too, at least what we're finding is the potential is huge across the board, specifically within customer service, right? But I think oftentimes the question that we're being asked in our sales processes here at Codif is, where do you start? And oftentimes it's about starting small, right?
Yeah.
So I guess, like, how do you navigate that conversation when there is so much opportunity within customer service? Like, where do you start with an organization?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple different strategies to this. Some people like to just start with their biggest pain point, like what is hurting you the most. And sometimes your business is in a situation where you need a solution now. You know, you might have, and Kelsey, I'm sure is chuckling because, you know, we've been in that solution before at Shokz where, you know, your growth is so quick that, you know, you need a solution today and you're going to choose what's going to have the most impact in the moment. You know, if you have an organization that maybe is feeling a little bit more cautious about introducing AI, we would call that like an opportunity to use it on a small try. Like what is a small opportunity where we can test this out, evaluate its success, and then move forward from there.
Yeah. And I imagine that sort of goes into building the business case for rolling out even more functionality. Which we know with executives, we need a strong ROI case with anything that we're going to implement. So yeah, how do you go about thinking through the best path to proving that ROI case?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I like to do is start off with, let's say you have a couple of different inquiry types that you want to be able to leverage AI to solve for. You want to figure out what your volume is of those inquiries and then average cost per ticket for those inquiries. And if you have it for those specific inquiries, if you're able to get your dollar amount for that ticket type, that's even better. It's a little bit more accurate of a metric. So you can kind of get a sense of how much the business would save if they were able to implement something like this that would be able to solve a certain percentage or all of these cases. So that's one way to look at it. And then if you were going to think about you know, improving your agent productivity with a co-pilot, you would generally look at what is your average handle time and on average, how much does this business reduce that average handle time? And, you know, give or take a couple percentages because every business is different and kind of get a look of what that's going to look like and how long it's going to take for that AI to pay off. Now, I've seen businesses where 3 months later, they've already paid for it just because of how much you're able to leverage it in solving some of these customer inquiries.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, Kelsey, this will probably resonate with you coming off a couple of recent conferences. When you walk into an expo hall at any call center, customer service, customer support event today, every company is doing AI. And it's overwhelming, right? And I can imagine as a seller, it's overwhelming. As a buyer, I can imagine it's even more overwhelming. So, you know, when it comes to like vendor selection, I'm definitely very curious. What does that process look like? What are things to look out for? And with your conversations with customer service leaders who are looking to often implement quickly, what are some potential pitfalls?
Yeah, so I would say like thing one, first off, see what's out there because there are so many different solutions that offer so many different things. So get a good sense of what's out in your landscape. Understand which AI this is. Because machine learning and natural language processing and GPT technology are all going to call themselves AI, but they're all going to function a little bit differently. And some of that technology is newer than others. So understand what exactly it is that you're purchasing, because there's definitely brands that do purchase a little bit older of a technology that has the word AI in it, but with an expectation that's going to function like GPT, and it doesn't. So understand what you're buying. You also want to understand what your AI solution is going to integrate with. I've seen, unfortunately, brands that will sign onto a platform and the contract comes and goes without it ever being implemented because it didn't integrate the way that they were hoping it would, and it required too much development work that they didn't have the ability to provide. So you want to make sure that you fully understand that. You should understand on your business end what resources are going to be needed on your side, and don't take necessarily the provider's word for it. Like, get into detail. So for example, the solution provider may assume that you have a developer on your team. But if you're, an 8-person e-commerce business, as Shokz was in 2016, you don't have a developer on your team. So you want to make sure that you understand exactly what's going to be needed. You might need, as a lot of these platforms do, a help center that's ready to go to be able to use as part of that solution. And if your help center is out of date, you need to add in some time to be able to get that ready in order to be in a place that you can leverage it. Other things that I like to ask, who doesn't this solution work for? And if the solution says, we work for everybody, like, it's lies. Because, nothing works for everybody. There's a reason that, you don't have 100% retention rate, no matter who you are. So, getting a good understanding of, if the solution isn't working for somebody, why isn't it working? And am I a company that's like that company? So that's another popular question that, and there's usually some transparency there in who this isn't going to work for from those vendors. In addition to that, I would also ask what the sales support or what support looks like after the sale. I don't know about you, but I've invested in poor technology in the past where, I thought this was going to be one thing. And then 3 months into having this technology, I realized maybe this wasn't the best solution after all. I think a lot of us have done that at some point in their careers. So, understanding, once I have this technology, what kind of help can I get? Is there an account rep who can help support me and who can answer questions? And are they going to be able to make recommendations for my business versus meet with me when my contract is up? So getting a good understanding of what that relationship is going to look like. And then, lastly, I value transparency. And when you're in a presentation, the vendor will often show you different clients that they've worked with. I like to see if those businesses are still working with that vendor. And you can ask, can I reach out to this client and learn a little bit about their experience? So that's a good way a comprehensive way to get a lot of information very quickly about a potential solution for you.
I'm having flashbacks to when we started working together and all the references you requested. But I think it, like you mentioned, it builds like good credibility. It helps build a long-term partnership. Clearly, something we both value when working together. One thing I was thinking of too is like, obviously, post support after the sale and the implementation are huge pieces. But one thing I feel like has come up too is, AI is changing every week. The technology, like we've been talking about this whole conversation, keeps evolving. A lot of teams are like, do I need to have a dedicated AI manager on my team? The same way a lot of them have system admins today. So that's been a piece of a lot of conversations. But I'm curious, like for you, what does AI do as far as like the team goes? I know we talked about reallocating some time to better support other things that go on behind the scenes. But I'm just curious, like, what are you imagining for teams as they evolve with AI today?
Yes, I'm so glad that you brought that up. So understanding what level of management is going to be required for that solution is really important because that does vary. So you might have one solution where you need a dedicated person on it full time, all the time to get it to be successful. There's other solutions that might not require quite that much. It might only need a couple hours a week. So getting a good understanding of what that's going to look like is a good part of the evaluation process. And then once you have that, as far as where that sits on your team, I've seen it in a couple different places. Most commonly, I will see it within CX as a service operations manager or a CX coordinator, somebody who usually in an internal team who's got a little bit more of an administrative or project-based role, which when you have an AI solution and you are having those productivity wins, you're able to afford that a little bit more. You're able to bring in some of that system management. Other places that I've seen it, some BPOs will offer it either as part of the team that you already have or as an additional service. I've also seen some AI platforms themselves offer it as an additional service. And then sometimes there's like a hybrid CX technology role. We're starting to create all these cross-functional roles in these different businesses. And, somebody like that may be able to own it as well within your business.
Great. Yeah, I think, AI just keeps evolving and changing, and it's exciting to be a part of it. CX is kind of the first industry to really get a taste of what it can be and what it can do to change, the day to day. And Karen, I don't know if you have any other thoughts from conversations you've had recently. Any other last minute questions before we hop into Q&A?
No, I think I'm definitely curious, Kristen, around you've selected a vendor, you're about to roll it out. Preparing oftentimes your customer service associates, right, for this new technology. Like, what does that look like from like a change management perspective, especially I think with some of the interesting use cases around agent assist functionality where it's having a pretty dramatic impact on workflows, but also changing the way volume is distributed. So I'm curious. Yeah, I'm curious a little bit more about the conversations with the front line and the managers and how that plays into an effective rollout.
Yeah, that's a good point in that it does require like some changes in SOP. I think one thing that I've seen is, agents are excited to have it, but sometimes they forget to use it. It's this brand new tool. They've never had something like this before. So, sometimes it'll be sitting there, but they'll just kind of be going on answering their questions, like kind of forgetting that they have this wonderful tool to leverage. So like it can take some just training to get them to rely on it. And then once they do, like they love it and they're grateful that they have it. So, after the initial change in workflow, after the training of how it works, there is a little bit of, did you leverage this tool as part of your resolution for this customer?
Yeah, that's super interesting. I'd be curious, Kristen, if there's anything else in your experience as a consultant that's coming up in the minds of executives, especially as technology is iterating. And oftentimes what we're seeing now, and this wasn't the case, 2 years ago, most of the conversations that we were having, companies were rolling out their first AI solution. Now that's shifted. Often people have tested the waters, right? Yep. And so I'm just curious, like, what kind of new things in 2024 do you think are like top of mind for folks as they're thinking about new technology?
Yes, I think the conversational experience is critical. I think customers expect that now. They're using ChatGPT themselves. They're seeing it on other businesses. So, businesses that are still leveraging, some of the older technologies, some of the traditional bots, I think are going to start standing out a little bit more. And, when you start thinking about your technology as a business, it's important to consider, I think one mistake some brands make is they only look at their own competitors in their space and what they're using in compared to them. So for example, at Shokz, it would be really easy to just compare our technology against Bose or against Sony or Poly or Skullcandy or any of these other headphone brands. But the reality is your customers not only interacting with headphone brands on a day-to-day basis, they're interacting, from Shokz perspective, with Noon, with Strava, with Nike, these other brands in that space. So, when you're looking at, is your technology up to date? Is it this modern experience that your customers are looking for? Are they getting those tracking numbers automatically because you have an automation set up as part of your ticketing flow? You got to compare yourself against what your consumer is seeing, not just what's in your specific space.
Yeah. So what would you say success looks like for a team that's in their first year, maybe of rolling out a chatbot, maybe dabbling into some other use cases, intent classification, routing, thinking about more end-to-end resolution of a customer interaction? Like, what does success look like maybe in that first phase, in terms of KPIs, things like that?
Yeah, so being able to reduce average handle time and being able to reduce number of inquiries received are two big ones that you can usually prove pretty easily within that first year. Some companies will automatically see their CSAT improve, like just from there, because speed is the number one thing that customers want in a resolution. Personalization is huge as well, but speed is kind of that first thing that tends to come up on customer surveys. So, you can see that CSAT increase along with that. And, from there, you can continue to make different optimizations. You can look at what is the resolution rate of each of these solutions that I've provided. Was this a good solution or not? And then continue to make tweaks into your experience, whether that's a bot or an automation.
Yeah. We hear a lot of concerns from folks that we're talking to, this balance, right, of cost, quality, and
yeah,
are we concerned that CSAT and other important metrics, effort score, things like that, are actually going to take a hit? And I'm how you sort of navigate that conversation.
Yeah. So I tend to see that conversation prior to the solution being adapted and kind of like the pitch phase. So there's a couple of different ways that you can kind of help mitigate any fears about that, which I like to call like security blankets when you're pitching a concept. Thing number one is, see if you have the opportunity for a free trial, a month-to-month contract, something that you can demonstrate the value of it without necessarily establishing a commitment that executives are going to be made nervous by. Another security blanket is a convenience clause in your contract where if for some reason you are unhappy with it, not that most people are, you could get out of that contract. You could also try it on, let's say, one of your lesser popular channels to kind of get a sense of how that's going to impact it. And then from there, roll it out onto your other channels. And then in addition to that, over communicate what that is going to look like. Make all of your executives, your employees feel like they have a say in what this looks like. They're aware of everything that's going on, because when there are surprises, that's when fear starts to come about. So, giving them these security blankets. And then I often find that once they've given it a chance, they see the success of it, and then they're excited to roll it out everywhere else.
Yeah, totally. Kelsey, any other questions on your end for Kristen before we hop into Q&A?
No, I feel like we've covered a lot of things really in depth, especially as like with implementing and all of that fun stuff goes. So I think we're ready for Q&A.
Awesome. Yeah, feel free to drop any questions into the Q&A chat. But we had one question. What are the best practices for integrating AI into a company's CX strategy and operations? And how can this be done in a way that aligns with business goals and values?
Yes. So I've seen businesses have two different strategies. One is top down and one is bottom up. So if you are a top down strategy business, understanding what those goals and values are and how AI is going to relate to that. And then if you're a bottom up business, defining why this AI is going to benefit the business essentially long term. So best practices for rolling out Um, well, I think obviously doing your due diligence, being able to present it to all the relevant stakeholders, and then really thinking through who all of those relevant stakeholders are. The web team, for example, if you've got something that's sitting on the website and is going to impact what that looks like, you don't want to leave out anybody who this is going to impact. Assigning a budget to it. Yeah, those are some of the things that I think I would think about as I was rolling it out initially.
We had another question. I think we talked about this a little bit, but around ensuring smooth adoption. So I don't know if you had any other tips or tricks we didn't already speak to.
Oh, let's see. Yes, so you want to bring the employees into it. We talked about that. Yeah. One thing that, let's see, what else would increase the smoothness? You know what? One thing that is helpful is if you have multiple people who are doing any kind of training on the AI, making sure that they're training the same way. That's something that I've seen before where, there's maybe two different potential solutions to a question. And if you're divided on how you're training, that can sometimes lead to poor performance from the AI. So that's another way that you can kind of help a smooth rollout is make sure that you're training consistently.
That's super interesting, especially from Kelsey and my seat, where we're working very closely with our implementation team, who are often working with our clients through this process, right? And I would think we spoke about a little bit about it earlier, but like this concept of AI readiness. So consistency in training, but I think you also were speaking to data sources and making sure your knowledge is up to date. Like, are there any other things from like an AI readiness standpoint, right, that like teams have to be considering? And it's not a, oh no moment, right? After the implementation is starting.
Yeah. If you haven't already had the conversation of, is this or is this not replacing my job, even if it hasn't been voiced to you, I think it's definitely something that needs to be addressed. Sometimes those concerns aren't elevated, even if they're really present. So if you're rolling out with your customer service team, that's something to definitely address. Having a constant place for your team to be able to share feedback is just a good part of culture. And then, a number of your team members may want to contribute to training, so being able to offer those opportunities, it's a great way to just add personal development. And also it gives them ownership of the project themselves. It's not just being handed down to them.
Yeah,
and then having, and then, updating all of your SOPs, all of your workflows, being able to measure the success of it.
Yeah, really, really crucial insights, I think, for anyone looking at rolling out a new technology. We had another question in the chat, pivoting a little bit here around the type of content that you engage with from an AI perspective. Like, where do you go to learn about technology? Where do you go to learn about AI? Yeah, so curious to learn a little more there.
Yes, so I have a couple of different ways. The nature of my consulting work makes it very easy because, part of what I do is create this Rolodex of potential partnerships that all of my clients could have. So I almost am cheating in a way because I get to talk to all of these really great brands and learn what they're doing. But if you were still in, for example, a customer experience role, a customer manager role, in a more traditional sense, conferences tend to have a lot of vendors and a lot of speakers who can tell you about what their experience has been and what they offer. So I've met a number of them that way. In addition to that, the news is full of it. So keeping up to date on, what's being released, what's being talked about, what What concerns do people have is very relevant and important, especially if your team is reading this. And then, attending webinars like these.
Awesome. Hope to do more of them with you, Kristen, for sure. I am seeing if there's any more questions. Oh yeah, which any CX leaders that you follow in the space that you think are?
Oh my gosh, so many CX leaders. Oh my gosh. I might have to get back to you on a list.
For sure. Cool. Kelsey, are we seeing any other questions that we haven't gotten to? I don't think so.
That was all of them. But I know we're a little over on our planned time, which I had a feeling would happen with how chatty we all can get together. But super informative, and if any folks who are in attendance have any other questions or follow-up, Kristen is readily available, as are Karen and myself. But we hope to do more of these in the future, especially as it keeps evolving in this space. I don't know if there's any final thoughts from either of you.
Kristen, it was so fantastic talking to you. We love to spotlight CX leaders in the space who are really thought leaders, and you are definitely one of those. And your insights, I think, are invaluable, right? Given your role, leading teams, but then now also consulting across multiple organizations. So really thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I had so much fun.
Thank you.
Cool. Thank you all.